Early impressions of Ardith.
Mm-hmm. Well, first, I thought she was attractive. She laughed a lot, made me laugh. I felt comfortable with her. She was much more, all right. She was much more social than me. I was pretty much a loner. I had a few friends, but not many. As I said, I was pretty shy. And Ardith was initially sort of a diversion, and I was flattered that someone thought I was attractive enough they wanted to actually spend time with me. So, the more we went out together, I think the more fun we had together, and we felt comfortable with each other. I mean, we were 15, so it's pretty early. Neither of us had had much dating experience at that point, which isn't surprising at that age in those times. That relationship just grew and grew and grew over time. And actually, as we got further into high school and then into college, Ardith in many ways was a point of stability for me in what was becoming a difficult situation at home. So I had someone I had learned to trust. I thought I was probably in love with her at that point, and she was willing to listen to me and to help me make decisions. And when I was with her, I was out of an increasingly difficult situation at home. Particularly as we went from high school into college, my mother and my father and mother were involved in the stress of starting a new practice. We bought this house. I turned much of the first floor, except for the kitchen and dining room, into an office. So there's a waiting room, an office for him, and a treatment room, all on the first floor of this house. So he was in solo, private family practice. His patients liked him, and his practice grew fairly steadily. Meantime, my mother is working to manage the practice, pretty much. So she was doing much of the billing, the organizing, the taxing stuff.
Understanding that you will be editing everything.
Yeah.
In the sense of looking at it.
Yeah.
What was the nature of the stress on you at home?
The stress was the relationship with my father. Mm-hmm. My father was German extraction, hence the name Keck. His father, my grandfather, I knew. He was alive, died when I was in my early teens, but I saw enough of him to know that he was kind of a hard-ass German. He was very strict, and my father would occasionally tell me stories about his home life that made it clear that he wasn't necessarily a happy camper. His father was very strict with him and sort of played mind games. Like when my father wanted to borrow his car, he'd say, "Well, I've had it running all day, it's tired, it has to rest overnight." Those kinds of little digs. Maybe that's important. I don't want to try to psychoanalyze this. I'm not in a position to do that. But my father was not much of a hands-on parent. My mother was the one I could confide in. My father was always difficult for me to approach with anything personal. If I wanted to talk to him about medicine, and once he understood that I really was looking forward to going to medical school, then, I got included in stuff like that.
What did you need from your father at that point that he couldn't provide?
Good question. intimacy, a sense of caring, maybe even
Warmth?
a sense of pride. There was not much warmth. There were times when it was, if we, my sister and I would sometimes think about how do we get our father in a good mood so that, we can get him to tell some stories. He could be very funny, and he had a lot of stories, particularly from medical school and his internship, that we loved to hear. And sometimes we had friends over where we'd try to get him to tell the stories to impress our friends with how funny he was. So he rarely scolded or disciplined me. My mother, I remember, did most of that. But the warmth and the feelings of love came mostly from my mother. My father, particularly, I think he was proud of my academic accomplishments. I got good grades. Whenever I remember being asked what I wanted to be, it's always I wanted to be a doctor. And so there was never any conflict there. I was already on the track that he wanted. And so you could say truthfully, I had no influence in this at all. I'm not pushing him, and that was true. How can I describe it? Rarely, if ever, did he say he was proud. I didn't hear that from him.
You wanted him to verbalize some things.
Well, it would have been nice.
I'm proud of you, Bill.
Yeah.
How was your day?
Yeah.
How's it going with Ardith?
Yeah, he didn't want to know how it was going with Ardith. My parents were not happy that I was dating Ardith. It's not that they disliked her personally, I don't think, but they didn't think she was good enough for me, I think is the case. Reason is Ardith's parents were very blue collar. Her father worked at the Bethlehem Steel Company. He rose to be in charge of the foundry there, which was a big deal.
It's
they're
a
making
big job.
battleships and
Big job.
bridges and stuff. He was very involved in that. He was traveling around the country, costing out jobs and all of that sort of stuff. But he only got to the 8th grade. Ardith's mother didn't get any further than that. And Ardith's mother was heavy set, and I remember them quietly reminding me that, daughters tend to grow up to look like their mothers as they...
Well, what they missed was that she provided you what you needed most, which was emotional support.
Yes.
Because that was what they missed.
Well, but I think that's also another reason that my father found it difficult, because what was happening here is that when I was in college, within 3.5 years of having moved into this, my mother putting as much sweat equity into this new venture as my father, including stripping wallpaper and painting, this old house and doing what she could at low cost and a lot of sweat equity to make it better, developed breast cancer at age, she must have been just turned 50. At that point, within a year and a half, she was dead. After going through very painful treatment, she died when I was a junior in college. So I knew she was terminally ill, and I knew I was losing her. My father, of course, was distraught, as here he is in still a relatively new venture that kept him hopping sometimes 24 hours a day. I mean, there's no respite when you're in single family practice, so calls at night. The pressure on him was terrific. And I think he just didn't know how to handle me or my sister, who's 2 years younger, who was just entering college when my mother got sick. So
Hold on just one second here.
Mhm.